Hey, how's it going everyone? These are some of the films I watched in March that I felt strongly enough about to want to share my thoughts with you. First up, I watched for the first time the entire Twin Peaks complete series, created by David Lynch and Mark Frost. The original series is such a good show with a huge cast of interesting and unique characters. It has such a special feeling with the music and how it doesn't shy away from weird or experimental filmmaking. It must have been truly groundbreaking when it was first released, but watching it now, I don't think every aspect of it has stood the test of time. I somehow have a sense of nostalgia for the show, even though I just watched it for the first time, so that's a beautiful thing to create. The film Fire Walk With Me from the Criterion release is needed viewing to get the most out of this world, but I was expecting a bit more from a feature film. The cast, aside from Leland Palmer, just didn't seem as magnetic as before, and it felt like a bit of a chore to get through so that I could get to the most recent series. The missing pieces is a nice addition to get more of the original cast back on screen, but I didn't care for it too much either. Twin Peaks: The Return is definitely the best that the series gets. It is so fun to see all the actors aged up in real time and guessing who is going to be doing what after all these years. The biggest downside in the show are that due to the many open story threads, it doesn't hold an immediate sense of urgency like other great shows. It often lacks the feeling that if I don't keep watching immediately, I'm going to miss out on what happens to the characters. So sometimes there's a lot of momentum and thrill building up, and then there's no climax because it purposefully wants to be vague and open-ended about things. This critique also applies to the rest of the series, but it does make it have a higher rewatch value and provides a space for tons of great fan theories to become possible with this style. It's just great to see a filmmaker just do whatever they want, no matter how experimental or outside the box. And David Lynch has created a beautiful, strange world unlike any other. And I just have to mention how gripping the addition of Eamon Farron's character was to this show. I didn't think there could be anyone creepier or more dangerous than Bob's character, but if anyone gets close, it was him. Overall, I think this series is great, and if Lynch ever thinks that there's more of a story to tell, I'm all in. Next, I watched John Wick 4, directed by Chad Stahelski. The John Wick films consistently get better and better with every outing, and this one's no different. The stunt performers in this are going all out with endless throws, car hits, and stair falls. And I will always keep proponing that they need a Best Stuntman and Woman category in the Oscars, because these people deserve some serious recognition. The lore continues to expand, and the new members of the cast are much welcomed and do a fantastic job. The camera work and action sequences here are incredible, and it's such a fun experience. Next, I watched A Prophet. This is a French film directed by Jacques Audiard. It shows a young man's 6-year journey through a prison and what he has to do to live. It's a brutal film about survival, cruelty, and trust. There are some gut-wrenching moments, and it's directed with incredible precision. It also has incredible special effects work, especially for 2009, that make the violence super believable and realistic. I heard the director hired former convicts as extras and advisors to the film to make it disturbingly authentic. I imported this on a Region B Blu-ray, and if you don't already have a region-free player, I'd highly recommend it to be able to view films like this at the highest quality possible. Next, I watched The Undisputed Saga. The original Undisputed stars Wesley Snipes and Ving Rhames, and it has such a distinct 90s vibe to it. Snipes' character is an inmate who has made an infamous reputation as the best fighter alive from underground boxing matches, and when the heavyweight champion of the outside world gets incarcerated, his position is challenged. I'll get into spoilers talking about the next films, so just skip to the next chapter if you want. Undisputed 2 is a soft reboot to the franchise and stars Scott Adkins and Michael J. White, with White's character being the same former heavyweight champ as in the previous film, but now he's clearly been wrongfully convicted. He is forced into a position where he has to fight in the underground prison world to get his freedom, and Yuri Boyka is the best fighter that stands in his way. These guys are both at top physical physique and are practically superhuman. The choreography and directing when it comes to the action side is incredible and very underrated because I rarely see people talking about these films. The dialogue is a bit corny at times, and the story isn't amazing or anything, but the characters are great. I knew Scott Adkins was in the next films, so the fight ending with him getting his leg broken was really surprising to me. So in Undisputed 3, he has to recover and seeps into a dark and dreary existence, similar to Batman in The Dark Knight Rises, even though this was made before that movie. He is now the protagonist for the rest of the series, and now has a chance to finally fight to escape the prison system. This again has insane MMA choreography and is full of incredible stunt performers and great fight scenes. It has some of the flaws as the previous film from a narrative perspective, but you're mainly watching these films for the combat sequences. The fourth film is actually a step up in the storytelling and has some real weight to it. The character of Boyka and Scott Adkins' performance is so great that it can make sense to want to make sequel after sequel, but you can only go so far before it gets diluted, and the way they handled this character arc was great. He accidentally kills a fighter in the ring, and now years of violence are taking a moral toll on his conscience. Boyka now has to give it his all and fights for the widow of the person he killed and to save himself. And of course, what else is there to say? The fighting is phenomenal. And it's not just the same thing over and over again. They really have a diverse set of styles, and I love the implementation of the grappling techniques throughout this one. I'd love to see Yuri Boyka in another film, but this story has a really great ending here. And Scott Adkins is still at the top of his game, so I just like to see him in more films in general. For any physical media collectors, these movies are getting pretty rare to get on Blu-ray, but I got an imported trilogy Blu-ray pack. I also watched Insomnia, directed by Christopher Nolan. It stars Al Pacino and Robin Williams, and is about Pacino's character being sent to Alaska to investigate the murder of a teen in a small town. It's always nice to find a new film that I haven't seen with Robin Williams because he was such a great actor and steals every scene that he's in. I really like the way the mystery unfolded in this, and it gives you just the right amount of information precisely when you need it. It also seems to be really heavily inspired by Seven, directed by David Fincher, from the way it's set up and the aesthetic of the movie, but I don't want to give away exactly why. Nolan's first 3 movies have such a different feel from his later ones, and as much as I love those, I would love to see him delve back into the R-rated foundation that he has. Next, I rewatched Tropic Thunder, directed by Ben Stiller. I love basically everything about this movie, and they really don't make comedies like they used to. The opening 15 minutes of the film is one of the funniest sequences ever, and perfectly sets the tone of the film. It works on so many levels, and it has an incredibly high rewatch value. You can just focus on the surface and have a great time and a ton of laughs. But when you look at how the film is crafted and how well it's written, you can truly appreciate how special it is. And of course, Downey's performance is hilarious, and he has some of the funniest dialogue.
Stop tailgating me, you pasty teabag!
Man, I don't drop character till I done the DVD commentary. Everybody knows you never go full retard.
I also can't believe that Les Grossman was played by Tom Cruise, and the makeup making him have those huge meaty hands and the facial prosthetics, I think transform and free him to behave so erratically. It's funny to imagine how it was right after they stopped filming, and then Tom Cruise is just standing there totally unrecognizable. Tropic Thunder is just a really fun time. I also rewatched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by Quentin Tarantino, for probably the 5th or 6th time. This immediately became one of my favorite Tarantino films. And I mean, how could it not? Look at all the beautiful cinematography on display here. If this isn't cinema, then I don't know what is. Tarantino has such a vast knowledge of film and a passionate love for the art form, and it's on full display here. The book is a must-read for anyone who loves this movie. It really expands on Cliff's character and adds some background to Trudy Frazier. Her character is brilliant, and I love the actors.
I say actor, not actress, because the word actress is nonsensical.
Performance and the influence that she has on Rick Dalton's character. Only Tarantino could have made this film, and it's crafted with such unique precision and care. I have the 4K steelbook of this, and despite the already long runtime, I hope an extended version comes out at some point because I need to spend more time inside this world with these characters. I also read Tarantino's latest book, Cinema Speculation. Like I said before, Quentin Tarantino is someone who has a deep love of film and is so enthusiastic about discussing them. A good portion of the book are chapters about films that had a big influence on him growing up, and he describes in vast amounts of detail background information about how they were made and analyzes them in different ways. There are several older movies that he gets in depth with that I didn't know anything about, so sometimes it was fun to be able to see them through his description alone, and other times I just wanted him to move on to the next film. The opening and closing chapters are the most personal about his upbringing and watching films with several of his mom's boyfriends. It's great to be able to understand his perspectives on a more personal degree, and these chapters are some of the most heartfelt I've heard Tarantino be. Next, I watched The Fabelmans, directed by Steven Spielberg. This is such a beautiful film and does a great job at capturing the intrigue and awe caused by falling in love with cinema. The pacing of the story was different than I thought it would be, but that made it so that I wasn't able to figure out what would unfold next. The performances from every single character was incredible, and they weren't just generic stereotypes, but clearly had some nuance and thought put into them. It's so cool to see some of the process of how you used to have to edit film, and the innovative tricks and techniques people used to create what they love. This just solidifies that Spielberg is still at the top of his game and constantly trying new things, despite already having so many successful years in the industry. Next, I watched Project Wolf Hunting, directed by Hong Sung Kim. It takes place on a cargo ship turned into a prison transport and carrying dangerous criminals from one prison to another. The action in this is super badass and it doesn't hold back. As you can expect, the plot is fairly straightforward, but the characters are exciting enough to carry the film. I can't show it here, but it has a ton of great kills. I've seen several reviews on Letterboxd complaining about the senseless violence, and I'm not sure what else they were expecting with this. Yeah, they could have made the story a bit more interesting or added more depth to the characters with longer runtime, but the gruesome violence would still be needed for who these characters are and where it takes place. Next, I watched the 2002 Ted Bundy film, directed by Matthew Bright. I think this was very well done, and I enjoyed it, but I can see how many people could have found it shameful or in poor taste. They don't shy away from showing the murders, and it stays in Bundy's disturbing point of view the whole time. I think for the film to stand out even more, it could have used a longer runtime for some better dialogue scenes, better cinematography, and then shown the murders in even more drawn out detail to make you stay in that headspace even longer. I think it's important to remember and think about disturbing realities like this so we can know why they happen and prevent them. Michael Riley Burke does a pretty good job in this role, but my favorite portrayal of Ted Bundy still has to be Luke Kirby from the criminally underrated No Man of God. I bought this on Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome. And on that note, next I watched Slow Torture Puke Chamber, directed by Lucifer Valentine. This is the finale of the Vomit Gore trilogy, and as you can imagine from the name, I can't show a second of footage on here. These films are basically just showing every kind of fluid the human body can excrete, over unnerving atmospheric sounds and screaming and gagging. The most interesting thing about these films aren't the films themselves, but what they cause you to think about. Why the actors do what they do, why you would want to film all this, why I would even want to watch this, and where the line between fiction and reality lies. These types of people live such rough and brutal lives, and it's sadly fascinating to see how they cope with it. There aren't many films that get you into this specific headspace, so depending on how you receive it, it can almost be a meditative and thought-provoking experience. There is more of a story and themes to unravel if you really pay attention and watch more of Lucifer Valentine's other works, but they definitely aren't for everyone. I have the DVD trilogy, but I know you can get these individually from Black Lava Entertainment. I also finished playing A Plague Tale Requiem on the PS5. This was probably as good as the first game, with having the expected graphical and gameplay enhancements that you would expect from a sequel in this time frame. The graphics are great for an indie studio, and the voice acting and sound are phenomenal. Hearing and feeling the rats on the DualSense controller crawling around from every direction is thrilling. It has some of the normal problems I find in a lot of video games as well, like little moments of gameplay that feel really tedious or unnecessary that really could have been cut out, or the fact that it tries to go so big that it goes dangerously close to quantity over quality, but luckily not even close to the way most games do. It still is a lot longer than I thought it would be, and I would have loved to see it be about 2 chapters shorter, so the animators could focus their time on making the cutscenes even better and getting things like lip synchronization more accurate. It's hard to talk about the story without spoiling everything, but it was solid. Mostly, there's only good things to say about this game, and it was a pretty fun time. I also listened to the audiobook Psych by Paul Bloom. Paul Bloom is a professor of psychology and cognitive science at Yale University. There's way too much knowledge and insight for me to try to begin with how in-depth this book is. However, one of the most memorable chapters was when he was describing how memory forms in adolescence and the different types of memory that we have. An anecdote that stood out was about a memory championship winner, where a guy won and was able to memorize the random order of an entire deck of cards, including their sets. He had a method for remembering each one by assigning an odd story scenario to each card and then creating a story that he could remember. I've read several of his other books, with Against Empathy still being my favorite. The title can be misleading, but it's masterfully written and can really help you examine your moral and ethical framework. So these are most of the films and other entertainment I've watched this month, and you can follow me on Letterboxd if you want to see the full list. Let me know if you've seen any of these films and what you thought of them. Thanks for watching.